Have you ever wondered, who will love me? I feel so old, unwanted, abandoned. I just want to cry and sleep forever. If so, you're not alone. In fact, a recent statistic revealed that 1 out of 2 people in the United States feel a significant sense of loneliness. If that's you, I just want you to know that we're excited that you're joining us today because we're going to talk about it, and I think you'll be glad that we did. Hey, my name is Eric, and whether you're sitting in front of a device in a coffee shop or a bar, we just want to say thank you for tuning in. We'd love to hear from you today. The best way to do that is to scan the QR code or to fill out the form next to the stream and take a moment to tell us about yourself. And if it's your first time with us, we'll be sending you a gift in the mail this week just for saying thank you for joining us today here at Crosspoint. Now, as you're doing that, we've got some exciting ways to connect around this place, as well as a chance to do some good in the community and in the world. In fact, this Sunday, June 4th, is the return weekend for donations as we serve the underserved and overlooked in our community through one of our missional partners, Wrapped in Love. If you have a donation to drop off, you can swing by the Crosspoint campus anytime Sunday morning or drop it off in the drop box next to the front entrance. And just know that you are making a huge difference right here in our city. Second, CSM, Crosspoint Student Ministries, is in full summer mode with exciting events and opportunities to serve our community all summer long. So if you have a student or you are a student that is in 7th through 12th grade, we hope you'll join us this Monday, June 5th for the Where's Waldo scavenger hunt at Hamilton Town Center Mall. Check out this QR code for more details. Last, by popular demand, we've got a new round of Clifton Strengths workshops, and this time, one for adults and a brand new opportunity for high school students. The 2-week Clifton Strengths Workshop is a fantastic opportunity to discover and leverage the unique strengths that God has wired into you. And the new Clifton Strengths for high school students can support teens and young adults as they're confident in who they are and how they can contribute to the world. With each workshop, you'll have the opportunity to complete the Clifton Strengths Assessment, as well as be trained by this Gallup Certified Strengths Coach. Interested? You can find out more as well as register by using the QR codes. All right, we've got a great service for you today. Now, one of the intriguing things about Jesus is that people who were nothing like Jesus liked Jesus, and he liked them back. Today we're exploring another question in this series, Is This Allowed? And this one we've probably all experienced and have some history with. Was Jesus ever lonely? So before we tackle that, here's Morgan and Danielle and the Crosspoint Band with a great song from Miley Cyrus.
We were good, we were gold, kind of dream that can't be sold. We were right till we weren't, built a home and watched it burn. I didn't want to leave you, I didn't want to lie, started to cry but then remembered I can buy myself flowers, write my name in the sand.
this band this weekend? Let's get up for these ladies, man, bringing us some great music. You know, really fascinating song. Miley Cyrus obviously wrote that. And it's kind of in response to her and Liam Hemsworth of, Hunger Games fame. Their marriage, their relationship dissolved, and as kind of almost a self-proclaiming anthem, she wrote this. And it's interesting because in this, she very creatively interpolates lyrics of "When I Was Your Man" from Bruno Mars. And so as you listen to that, I mean, that was the song that he played for her at their wedding. And so, she just kind of wrote this, and it's fascinating, but at the same time, it's really interesting because it's kind of a sign, it's kind of a narrative of our culture, this idea that, man, I don't need anybody, I can do my own things, I can buy my own flowers, I don't need anybody as I journey through this life. And it really just kind of captures really the background narrative of what many people in our culture are feeling and experiencing. And so this is what we're going to look at this weekend, this whole idea of loneliness. And as we ask our second question in this series, is this allowed? So, man, welcome to Crosspoint. Man, excited to have you here with us this weekend. Man, so excited. Let's make some noise for those joining us online in the online spaces this weekend. We are so excited. If you're in a coffee shop, a bar, at home, wherever you're at. My name's Curt, and if you're here for the first time, certainly hope it's the first of many times with us here at Crosspoint. And we're answering questions in this series of the real Jesus. How did he respond? What kind of things did he deal with? And we're trying to kind of get to some real answers. And part of our hope in this is really that we begin to see that Jesus, man, he gets us. He understands, the things that we go through. He went through many of the same things. He experienced many of the same emotions that we experience. And the crazy thing about Jesus is that, people who were nothing like him liked him. I mean, people who didn't have the same life or lifestyle or experience, they actually liked him, loved being around him, and he liked them back. It's crazy. And so today, we're going to ask this question, was Jesus ever lonely? And this is really a trending topic in our culture right now. I don't know if you've kind of seen the news on this. One of my friends emailed me some statistics recently, actually an entire report that came from our U.S. Surgeon General, who just recently actually identified loneliness as an epidemic in our country. And, I mean, it's just crazy. And I was a little surprised as I started reading this, and it began to really break my heart, partly because I began to read things that I have conversations with people on nearly every single day. And it's so much so that I just began to kind of think about, what are we talking about this weekend, and how do we just kind of lift up, what Jesus says about this. And so they list in this report some of the national trends on loneliness. I mean, they're just kind of breathtaking, to be honest. There's an increase in only one item, and it's not an item you want increase in, and that is in social isolation. An increase of 24 hours per month per person of social isolation, more than just a handful of years ago. And, all the rest of them are just going down. And, I mean, it's things like household family engagement down 5 hours a month, companionship down 14 hours a month, social engagement with friends, think about this, down 20 hours per month, non-household family engagement down 6 hours a month, social engagement with others outside of those realms down 10 hours a month. And I want to read for you a bit of the U.S. Surgeon General's kind of letter as he kind of overviewed what's going on right here. Here's what he said. He said, when I first took office as Surgeon General in 2014, he's in his second term, I didn't view loneliness as a public health concern. But that was before I embarked on a cross-country listening tour where I heard stories from my fellow Americans that surprised me. People began to tell me that they felt isolated, they felt invisible, they felt insignificant. Even when they couldn't put their finger on the word lonely, time and time again, people of all ages and socioeconomic backgrounds from every corner of the country would tell me things like, I have to shoulder all of life's burdens by myself. Or things like, if I disappear tomorrow, nobody will ever even notice. He said it was a light bulb moment for me. Social disconnection was more common than I had realized. In the scientific literature, I found confirmation of what I was hearing. In recent years, look at this statistic right here. About 1 in 2 adults in America reported experiencing loneliness. And get this, this was before the COVID-19 pandemic cut off so many of us from friends, loved ones, support systems, only exacerbating loneliness and isolation. Man, I tell you what, this blew me away right here. I mean, it absolutely blew me away. And yet it shouldn't have, because I talk to people every single day that are saying these same things. And when you do the math on these statistics, I mean, what this really means is that every single one of us sitting here right now, tuning in right now, either you are experiencing a significant degree of loneliness or the person right next to you is. 50% of our culture, 1 out of 2 adults. And the numbers aren't any different. In fact, they're higher for our young people today. And so this just kind of brings us back to this question, was Jesus ever lonely? Like, does he get this? Does he understand what it's like to experience such things? Now, as we think about this a bit, I want you to think about Jesus the man. I mean, Jesus was fully man. He was fully human. It's what was unique about him. And he traveled all throughout the land of his birth. I mean, he never traveled all that far away from home. He gathered fame and followers. He knew what it was like to be surrounded by the masses. People would follow him everywhere he went. But at the same time, he knew that love at times was going to be lost without warning. In fact, when we kind of travel to the end of his life, I mean, he knows what it's like to have hundreds of people, thousands of people walk away, people that were with him, follow him, all celebrating, all of a sudden to turn their backs and go the other way. In fact, even his closest friends, I mean, as he heads toward some of the most difficult final days of his life, I mean, his closest friends abandoned him out of fear for their own lives. I mean, as he stood there getting tried and standing, getting ready to be executed, I mean, he stood there alone. And in that moment, I mean, when you see, imagery and kind of picture in your mind this idea of Jesus hanging on the cross, you have to think that he felt abandoned. In fact, we don't have to imagine it because he said it. In fact, Matthew said, my God, why have you abandoned me? And so, Jesus, he experienced a bit of this. Now, the crazy thing of what happened on the cross is he actually willingly chose that. He chose to go that direction so that you and I actually wouldn't have to. Now, one of the things that I've discovered is kind of true on this, and if you've ever felt this, you're going to be able to confirm this as well, is I think one of the things that's causing such a high degree of loneliness in our world today is that we tend to hide some of our deepest hurts. We tend to hide some of our deepest wounds. I mean, the things that scare us the most, we tend to hide them. The things that kind of reveal, us as kind of vulnerable emotionally or even mentally, we tend to hide those. We hide the depths of these things, and that only increases the loneliness. And I can tell you, I know what it feels like because, I don't know, a year and a half ago, early 2022, I found myself on the front end of an anxiety, depression kind of journey. And I'd never been down this path before. In fact, I began having panic attacks in the middle of the night. I didn't know that's what they were. I'd just wake up. I couldn't get back to sleep. My mind would begin racing. I couldn't get it to slow down. I couldn't center myself. I'd just stay awake the rest of the night. And I just entered this downward spiral of thoughts. And this just went on for weeks. And I thought, well, I've just got to break this cycle. And I just remember one day waking up, and I remember saying to my wife, Julie, I said, Julie, I just feel so alone. And I'm sure it was kind of insulting to her at the time because, I mean, she's like sitting right next to me, kind of like, hello, I'm right here. But isn't it true? You, if you've been here, you can be surrounded by people. You can be surrounded by good people, people that love you, and yet you can feel really, really alone, and you can't figure out sometimes even why. In fact, in the book, he gets this, Max Lucado, he writes something, and this is kind of a corresponding resource we're encouraging you to pick up during this series. They're available in the Commons. You can get them at any bookstore. He talks about this. He says, no one knows oftentimes that you're lonely. On the outside, you're packaged perfectly, your smile's quick, your job is stable, your clothes are sharp, your waist is small, your calendar's full, your walk is brisk, your talk is impressive. But when you look in the mirror, you fool no one. When you are alone, the duplicity ceases and the pain surfaces. I knew exactly what this meant. I mean, I felt that. It wasn't like I was intentionally hiding things, but at the same time, I mean, if you would have looked at me, you'd go, oh man, he's moving, he's smiling, I mean, he's quick to engage with people. Maybe you have the same experience, or maybe your experience is on the opposite side of the spectrum. Lucado, he goes on, he says, maybe you've always been on the outside of the circle looking in, and everybody knows it. Your connection's a bit awkward, your companionship is seldom requested, your clothes are dull, your looks are common, Ziggy's your hero, and Charlie Brown's your mentor. If either of these kind of polar ends of the spectrum, kind of strike a chord with you, I just want you to know, man, this is not God's plan or design for the way he desired our lives to go. All right, this isn't the way he created things to be. And honestly, when we're experiencing this, we're not living at the best version of ourselves. And so I want to take us all the way back to the beginning. I want us to get a little bit of a picture of how God started things, what his dream was for us. And if we go back to the beginning of the human race, we find this in the first book of the Bible, this compilation of different writings. The book of Genesis is kind of this narrative refrain that tells us the creation narrative and how things began to be populated in our earth. And God's creating everything. And among those things are you and I. And all these things he's creating, he says, it's good. It's good. I mean, he creates the sky, the sun, the moon. He says it's good. He creates, the land. It's good. The animals, the fish. It's good. Cats. He's like, oh my word, my bad. I'm so sorry. No, not really. He even found a way to find to see that cats were good. I don't know how he did that, but he said it's good. And then he said dogs, by the way, they're great. That's his name backwards, by the way, in case you're wondering. He really likes that one. And so then you like flip the page and you get to the second chapter, the second sequence of the creation narrative, and all of a sudden we hear God say something that he's never voiced in the history of at least the world as we know it. He looks at Adam. He looks at Adam standing there. He's created Adam, and he says, it's not good that the man, because he's like the only man at that moment, it's not good that man is alone. But you see, God's not about loneliness. He didn't create us to go through the struggles on our own. He didn't create us to go through the good times, the joyful times on our own. He didn't create us to pursue him on our own. Maybe you've heard someone say, maybe a friend, a family member, somebody said, I don't need church. I don't need some group of people to have a faith. I just have a faith. I don't need to be a part of a small group. I don't need to be a part of a team or be involved. What I got with God, my faith, it's just between me and God. Maybe you've heard somebody say that. Maybe you've said that at some point. And I've heard that many times. And when I hear it, I almost at times feel like it's admirable. I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm the one that's not doing it right. Because it sounds like, man, they've got it together. Until you read the book of Genesis, until you read the creation narrative, you begin to realize this is not at all the way God designed the human race to operate. And we can say it. We can say, I can do this. I can buy my own flowers. I can dance with myself. But as much as you try to convince yourself of it, here's the reality. You and I were created to pursue the purposes of God and the plans of God with the people of God. That's just the way God created it. That's his heart for us. In fact, the prophet Jeremiah, he says, I know the plans I have for you. And he says, they're good. They're not bad plans. They're not plans to harm you. They're actually plans to give you a hope and a future. And even though at times you and I don't feel it, even though at times we don't see how it's going to work out, even though at times, I don't know how this is going to go, God says, I've got a plan for your life. And he says things to us like, hey, if you'll just seek me, I'm going to tell you something. I guarantee you're going to find me. He says, if you'll knock on the door, if you'll pursue me, if you'll run after me and kind of, try to run after me, he said, I guarantee you're going to find me. Meaning he wants us to pursue him, but he never created us to do that on our own. In fact, check this out. Ecclesiastes, which is an Old Testament book, and the Bible is a guy who wrote this, who kind of had everything, had done everything, under the sun. He says, there was a man all alone, and he neither had son nor brother. There was no end to his toil, meaning he just worked. All he did was work. And yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. For whom am I toiling, he asked, and why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? This too is meaningless, a miserable business. See, I think it's interesting that in the middle of this little moment right here, this guy says, hey, I was really well off. I think it's funny that God kind of brings that to the surface, almost like he wants us to see that you can be extremely successful. You can look like you have it all together, and yet you can be miserable and lonely. And God says, hey, this isn't my plan. This isn't the way I designed it to be. In fact, he goes on right after this. He says, but two people are better than one. He says, because they get more done by working together. If one falls down, the other can help him up. But it's bad for the person who's alone and falls because no one is there to help. See, I think this is exactly what's going on in our country right now. I think this is exactly what the Surgeon General is talking about when he talks about this loneliness epidemic. In fact, here he is talking a little more about it. Take a look at this.
Loneliness is far more than just a bad feeling. Being socially disconnected, which can range from feeling alone to being isolated, is bad both for individual and societal health. Research shows that loneliness and isolation are associated with a greater risk of heart disease, dementia, stroke, depression, anxiety, and premature death. In fact, lacking connection can increase the risk of premature death to levels comparable to smoking daily. Loneliness and social isolation are also far more common than we might realize. About 1 in 2 American adults report experiencing loneliness, Everyone can be impacted across all ages, socioeconomic conditions, and geographies. This widespread disconnection presents profound threats to our health and well-being. Social connection is as fundamental to our mental and physical health as food, water, and sleep, and it affects our performance and productivity at work, school, and in our communities. Now is the time to invest in building social connection. This first ever Surgeon General's advisory on our epidemic of loneliness and isolation shows us how. The keys to connection are simple. Answer a phone call from a friend. Invite someone over to share a meal. Listen and be present during conversation. Seek out opportunities to serve others. These steps may seem small, but they're extraordinarily powerful. By strengthening our relationships, we can improve our heart and brain health, reduce our risk of diabetes and high blood pressure, boost our immune systems, and lower our risk of depression. We can build lives and communities that are healthier and happier, and we can ensure our country and the world are better poised than ever to take on the challenges that lie ahead.
You know what's absolutely crazy to me is the things that he just offered as solutions are the very things that Jesus built into his community called the church. It's almost like Jesus knew exactly what we were going to be experiencing. You know, when I found myself on this kind of downward spiral, I started some counseling. I did a couple months of counseling, and still do to this day. But after a couple months, I began to realize, like, part of my issue was that I'd kind of become prideful. I began to kind of want to hide some of the stuff that was going on inside of me. And when I say hide prideful, I mean, it's not like I was embarrassed about it necessarily. It's like I just didn't want everybody to know. I'm like, I don't need the people close to me. I don't need my family that care about me. They don't need to be burdened with one more thing. And yet the truth is, there's still some pride in that. And what I discovered was really going on at a much deeper level is that I just really had this thinking that was like, man, if they really knew how broken I actually was at the moment, I don't know that they would want to be around me. I don't know that people would want me to be their leader. I don't know that my wife would actually want to be married to me. I mean, and these thoughts are real. I mean, if you've had thoughts like this, I mean, you've probably had thoughts. I don't know that my spouse would want to stay with me. I don't know that my friends would actually want to be with me. I don't know that anybody would want to date me. And the crazy thing is this is a real thing. And yet the more we hide, the more lonely we become. And then the more lonely we become, we just continue to hide. And so one of the very first things that I did as I began to break this cycle is I reached out to a few close friends and I just said, hey, here's where I'm at. And number one, I just want you to pray for me. I just want you to, would you just pray for Julie and I? Would you just, sit and listen and allow me to just share a bit? And thank you for not just giving a whole bunch of advice. And have you tried this and have you tried that? But just being willing to kind of just be there. And I can't tell you how much of a life-giving moment that was. And then after that, one of the next things I did is I met with our leadership here at Crosspoint. I met with our governance board, and I just come off of a time of rest, and I said to them, I actually said these words out loud. I said, I just want you to know, man, I'm kind of like damaged goods right now. I mean, I feel like I've experienced a lot of brokenness over the last couple of years, and I just feel like I'm damaged goods. And I can't tell you how affirming it was to actually be able to say that out loud and to be affirmed and say, hey, we're here for you. We're behind you. It was so life-giving. And I was thinking about just, all of us walking in this weekend and the things that we're carrying and that people see and that people don't see. And I thought, man, I want this kind of life-giving experience for every single one of us, for every single one of you. I want that kind of freedom when you begin to realize, you got people that are coming alongside you and running with you and praying for you and putting courage in you and allowing you to take steps closer and closer and closer toward the freedom that God designed for you. That's what I want. And I know for many of us, we want that as well. But see, it's not enough for me to want it for you. I feel as your pastor, like part of my responsibility is to help facilitate that for you. And so this began to take me to a passage of Scripture that we find in the New Testament that gives us a picture of what the first century church looked like that we used to circulate all the time when we first started Crosspoint. It comes out of Acts chapter 2. And I want to read this for you because it's just kind of this picture that I thought, man, as you listen to this, if you think about this, if you go, okay, if I lived like this first group of people known as the church, this people, they don't have a building, they're just a people. All right, if we just live this way, I just think it would be harder and harder for us to experience this kind of loneliness because I think Jesus knew what he was doing when he assembled this thing called the local church. In fact, here's the Acts 2. This is a paraphrase, by the way, that comes from Dr. Gilbert Belzekian. He was a professor up at Wheaton College for a number of years. And he put some relevant words to what happened in that first century out of Acts 2. He says, there was once a community of believers who were so totally devoted to God that their life together was charged with the Spirit's power. In that band of Christ followers, believers loved each other, the radical kind of love. They took off their masks. Think about this. They took off their masks and they shared their lives with one another. It says they laughed. You know why they laughed? Because Jesus created us to laugh. He created us to have fun. We looked at that last weekend. They laughed and they cried and they prayed and they sang and they served together in authentic Christian fellowship. I mean, what this is saying is, I don't just come in here and sit in a seat and then walk out when I'm done. I don't just, tune in online and shut my computer as soon as the message is over. He says, no, there's something about this group of people. I mean, if I want to combat the loneliness, if I want to feel like God's doing something and I'm a part of something bigger, there's a certain element that defined this community. It was this idea of devotion. They were devoted to one another as a people. Here's what it says next. It says, those who had more, this is how devoted they were, shared freely with those who had less until socioeconomic barriers melted away. And then look at this next word right here. People related. Say this word with me right here. People related. What's that? Together. This is the whole point of this right here. It says people related together. They were devoted to togetherness. People related together in ways, look at this, that bridged gender and racial chasms. It celebrated cultural differences. I mean, they were kind of like, you need something? I need something? Man, I'm going to sell something I have so I can make sure you have what you need. And this is like how devoted they were to being together. And then it says this community of believers, this church, offered unbelievers a vision of life that was so beautiful, it took their breath away. It was so bold, so creative, so dynamic, they couldn't resist it. And look at this, the Lord added to their number daily those who were joining them, those who were being saved. This whole thing was built on togetherness. And I tell you what, it's been a hard season for togetherness, right? I mean, we've been through our experiences, all of our own experiences when it comes to, COVID and the pandemic over the last number of years, and it's changed our habits. And I just think it's made life harder. I mean, even as you listen to our Surgeon General, talks about productivity is harder when we're not socially, fed. And I think that's one of the reasons life is just so hard sometimes right now. I think the world changed. We had to make all these adaptations in many ways for the good. I think there's some really cool things that came out of the last few years. How we work, how we do meetings, the way we do education, the way we do church, that now we're not just bound to a location. We have people all over the city, state, even our nation. It's sometimes our world tuning in, connecting with us right here. I think it's really cool how here at Crosspoint, we've got people that connect nearly every single weekend in person with us. But guess what? They do their small group experience online just because they want to be able to connect with people that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do so with because there's not a proximity. I think that's really cool. I think it's really cool that we have people that tune in every single weekend on the other side of a screen, and yet they every single week are sitting shoulder to shoulder in a bar or a coffee shop with people doing community together in a small group experience. I think it's really cool that we have, dozens of volunteers that serve in their kids and sometimes at our front doors that rarely come to in-person services, but they watch online, then they come and serve in person because they want to connect with that togetherness. I think all these options are great. I think it's been really cool how, institutions and organizations, including the church, have adapted. But I think the one thing that hasn't changed that we've got to continue to go after is how do we do together? In fact, this is what the writer of Hebrews, I think, was talking about when he said, let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love. Another way to think about that, he's kind of saying, you and I, we have a responsibility to push one another forward to love. Now, the Gospel of John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the writer John, he says God is love. So really what this Hebrews writer is saying is that our responsibility, one of the things we do for one another is we push one another forward toward God. We're pushing each other toward God and toward good deeds. Now, good deeds isn't just doing something nice for the neighbor. That could be a part of it, but this really at the core in the Greek language, good deeds, is like the purpose that you're here for. The reason, the things that you uniquely bring to the world that you're implementing and bringing those to the people around you. And so what he's saying is when we're together, I push you towards God and you push me towards God. And at the same time, I push you towards purpose, fulfilling the reason that you're here on this earth, and you push me towards purpose, toward fulfilling the thing that God put me on the earth for. And then he goes on, he says, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. And then he goes on to say, all the more, all the more. Let me be really clear. It doesn't matter if you tune in, online, if you're sitting in the seats every weekend, if you do small groups online, or you meet, shoulder to shoulder. The thing that I think God always had in mind is there has to be a togetherness. And when we don't have a togetherness, you're robbing yourself of something that you're supposed to experience. See, this is one of the reasons I think being on a volunteer team has always been such a part of the fabric of what it means to be a part of Crosspoint. It's one of the reasons you hear us talk ad nauseum about getting into small groups, because this is where togetherness gets fostered. I think it's cool. We can go online and get a teaching. I think it's cool when I'm traveling. I can tune in online if I'm not able to get here logistically. But at the same time, you can come into this space and you can sit in the seats and you can walk out. And if there's not a sense of, okay, how are we together, then we're not receiving what this writer says. We're not receiving the encouragement from one another. Because see, together is where the magic happens. I think together is actually where loneliness gets dissipated. And so perhaps, for you, maybe one of your next steps this weekend is just saying, hey, I want to join a volunteer team. I want to become a part of a team, whether you're here in the building or tuning in online. You're saying, I just want to be a part of a team so I can be a part of something. Or maybe one of your next steps is getting in a group. Maybe it's just saying, hey, I need to get in a group. And I know it can be scary. I know you're like, I don't know if I'm going to know anybody. You might go to the groups page and say, man, I don't like anybody in the men's groups or women's groups or the anybody groups. Hey, that might be a perfect opportunity to start a group. Maybe God is urging you to say, hey, I want to start a small group of community with a few of my friends to give us a place to connect. Man, if that's where you're at, man, let us know. We would love for you to help you take that step. Now, for the rest of our time today, I want to take this to a very, very personal level. All right, a very personal level. And I want to give you three things as we think about this loneliness epidemic in our country right now. I want to give you three things that should be a part of every close relationship, every single one of us needs. All right, and I think when we do this, it just begins to diminish loneliness. All right, and I know many of us, we're here because we want to get close to God. We're tuning in because, man, I want to get closer and feel God more and more in my life. I want to grow in my faith. And yet one of the things I know is the people that sometimes we do life with, I don't know how to say this, any better than this, they just don't help you do that. All right, the people that you circulate with the most don't help you do that. And so today, I want to help us think through, how do I organize my life, the people I do life with, so that I can actually have people that are pushing me closer and closer toward love and closer to God. All right, and as you think about this, I just want you to think through, how does this apply to my life? All right, you know your life best. You know what's going to work best for your life. All right, but I want you to ask the question, who do I maybe need to include into my inner circle? All right, and some of you, as you think through this, you're going to actually take some relationships to an entirely different level. For others of you, you might find, man, I'm already doing life with like a number of people who, are heading in similar directions, maybe have a similar faith, but one of the things that's not happened is perhaps there's not an intentionality. Maybe you're just hanging out instead of really pushing each other and building into one another. So three things I want to give you. The first thing is this. I think this is needed in every single close relationship. Number one is we pray for one another. We pray for one another. One of the defining characteristics of this first century group of people that was called the church is it says they laughed and they cried, and look at this, it says they prayed and they served together in authentic Christian fellowship. See, this is deciding to say, hey, I'm going to take this a bit beyond the surface level. All right, I'm gonna take the risk when I can identify, okay, who are those kind of inner people for me? I'm going to be willing to share a bit of my failings. I'm going to share a bit of my big fears that I have going on in my life. I'm going to share the moments where I've blown. I'm going to share the celebrations too. I'm going to share some of the places where I'm nailing it. All right? In fact, this is one of the reasons I love my men's group. My men's group gets together every single Wednesday, and we have anywhere from 6 to 8 guys. I think there's 10 or 12 on the group list, and it grows, 1 or 2 guys a month. And we just get together, and while we all work in different industries and we're all doing different things, one of the things we realize is we're all in the same storm called life. And it doesn't matter what job I'm in. My boat might be different, but I'm still navigating some of the same things. When I sit around and hear other guys talk about the challenges or maybe some of the solutions they've experienced or how God has come through for them, I get encouraged. And I think they do when they hear that from me as well. I'd encourage when I get a text from them when I share, hey, this is what I'm struggling with, and somebody will text me later in the week and say, hey, I'm praying for you. Here's a little bit of encouragement. I get encouraged when I do the same, when I'm able to text someone, when I'm able to drop a message or call and just say, hey, I know you shared this. I just want you to know I'm with you. I want you to ask yourself, do you have friends that go beyond the surface? Do you go beyond the surface with anyone right now? I'm talking about somebody who you respect their prayer life enough that you can go, you know, when I'm having a really rough night, even if it's like midnight, I know I can call you. You know, because if you don't, let me tell you something, you're robbing yourself of something God designed for you. And I want to challenge you to make some changes. Now, I'm not saying kick your current, friend circle to the curb. I mean, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying there might be some people that you might go, okay, I need to be a little more intentional about bringing them into kind of my inner circle, people who push me closer to God. All right, see, Jesus modeled this for us. He never kicked anybody to the curb. I mean, Jesus, think about this. He at times interacted with the 5,000. He fed the 5,000. There were times when he trained the 120. I mean, he spent a lot of time discipling the 12, but then he also closely mentored the three in his inner circle. So you don't kick anybody to the curb, but you just choose carefully and say, okay, who of that group am I going to invite into that inner place? In fact, Jesus models this for us in Matthew chapter 26. We see this is one of the most difficult moments in his life. I mean, he knows what's coming. He knows he's about to be tried. He knows he's about to be beaten within an inch of his life. All right, he's about then to go to the cross. And here's what Matthew tells us. It says, Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, sit right here while I go over there to pray. So he's talking to the 12 right now. He said, hey, I love all 12 of you, all right, but I'm going to go tap into my inner circle for just a moment, all right, because there were certain things that he did only with Peter, James, and John. All right, and they were the only ones that got invited to go pray with him right now. There's certain times Jesus just got away with just the inner three. And it says, and taking with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, that's James and John, he began, and look at what it says right here. It says he began to be sorrowful and troubled. He's like, I'm not sharing my deepest sorrows, my deepest needs with everybody. He said, no, I'm going to share that with my inner circle right here. You know why? Because I'm hurting. And then he said to them, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. And he's like, guys, listen, man, I'm struggling. I'm overwhelmed right now. He says, will you remain here and watch with me? Now think about this for a moment. If Jesus, the Son of God, if he needs to pull his three inner circle aside for a moment and get a little time to just kind of say, hey, I'm hurting right now, guess what? I think I can guarantee you and I need to do moments like that as well. And there's probably people in your life that need it as well. I mean, this isn't just a receiving thing. It's like, who in my life needs that? Who needs that from me? I'm telling you, if you want to change the game in relationships, if you want to change the loneliness factor, it starts with asking the question, man, how can I pray for you? It really gives a picture into the window of the inner soul. You start doing life together. Before long, the loneliness begins to lift, and there's a freedom and a healing that begins to emerge. And so number one, we pray. Number two, we strengthen and encourage. Encourage and strengthen. We build each other up. There's a great little episode of this we see in 1 Samuel. This is the Old Testament part of the Bible with a guy named David, King David. This is before he became a king. And he's like scared for his life. I mean, he's running for his life. And fortunately, he's got a friend that when life gets hard, his friend runs to him instead of away from him. In fact, here's what it says. It says, Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horish and helped him. Look at what it says right here. Helped him find his strength in God. Let me ask you a question. Do you have people in your life that can help you find your strength in God? Do you have people that encourage you, that can strengthen you? Somebody who says when you're struggling, you give an SOS that says, hey, listen, I'm here for you, I got you, and I just want to remind you what God says about you. All right, because that's all you can do. I mean, that's all I can do. I mean, when people call me for an SOS, when I get a crisis call, usually I'm showing up going, hey, I just want you to know I'm here, I got you, and I want to tell you what God thinks about it. I want to encourage you in this moment right now. All right, and in fact, I want to help you out on this because this sounds easy. This is not as easy as it sounds, all right? And so I want to kind of give you a talking point list on this right here because you're probably this week going to run into somebody where they may need these talking points right here. So, what happens usually is when somebody gives an SOS, we go, man, I want to help them. And then we start going, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to have the right words. I don't even know what to say. I hope I don't do more harm than good. And then we end up kind of avoiding the situation and they miss out on what they need, and we miss out on being purposeful in that moment. So I want to put these 4 verses up for you right here, and I encourage you to screenshot these. You might pull your phone out. I guarantee you'll probably use this week. If you're tuning in online, just screenshot it on your laptop or, with your device, whatever you need to do. But this is how I, when I, show up to strengthen somebody or encourage somebody or just, kind of be there, this is what I usually do. I'll say something like, hey, I don't know what you're going through. I can't begin to imagine what it feels like, but I just want you to know God is with you. I just want you to know God is with you. And because of that, you don't have to be in despair. You don't have to be afraid. You know why? Because he's a plan for you. And I know right now you're probably struggling a bit with even seeing, okay, I don't even see how that's going to come about, but you just need to be assured that God is working even when you can't see it. And you probably don't even feel it right now. I mean, you probably have no idea how this thing's going to resolve itself, but you just need to be reminded, nothing is impossible with God. Nothing. I mean, right there, that'll help you coach somebody through any situation. Right? You can use that for yourself right there. But God says, I didn't create you to do it by yourself. You need to do this for others, and others need to do this for you. Is that helpful right there? You guys like that right there? Yeah, all right, good. All right, and then you go back to pray, because sometimes at the end of the day, all you can do is pray. So you pray, and then you strengthen and encourage one another, and then the third thing you do is you carry some burdens. You carry some burdens. You need a friend in your inner circle who's willing to carry some burdens. This is what the Apostle Paul talked about when he's writing this letter to this group of Christians in Galatia. He says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will, look at what he says, fulfill the law of Christ. Fulfill the law of Christ. This is the great law of Christ right here, which is where Jesus says, hey, I don't want you to just do for others what you want done to you. I want you to do for them what I've done for you. I want you to love them that way, which I'm going to tell you isn't always the easiest thing to do. Because nearly every situation, it's different. It feels different. It feels the same sometimes, and you discover it's different. And you say, okay, I'm just going to go in. I'm going to be there. I'm going to say, hey, I'm here. I got you. All right, I want to remind you, what God says about you. And then you don't just show up, but you get involved. And you say, okay, well, how do I get involved? Well, this is where, as we talked about a few weekends ago, you become a first-class listener, a first-class noticer. You begin to listen. You begin to pay attention to what they need. There's not like a playbook on this. You just pay attention. If they're struggling, okay, how do I get in that struggle with you? If they're in the hospital, I'm going to be at the hospital with you. All right, I'm going to carry this burden for you. I'm going to text you in the morning. I'm going to send you a prayer. I'm going to send you some encouragement. I'm going to call you. I'm going to remind you of God's promises this week. I'm going to tell you something. This never gets old when I see this play out this way. I remember the first time it played out here at Crosspoint. I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, this thing we see in Acts chapter 2, it's happening. In fact, I just saw it a couple months ago. We had a family who was going through a difficult time and dealing with some stuff medically, and I kind of got brought in the loop a little late on it, and so I put a call in to say, hey, I heard this was going on. Somebody said, hey, thought you might want to know about this, and I called them and said, hey, how's it going? And they were actually a little surprised when I called. They're like, oh man, well, thanks for calling. And I'm like, how you guys doing? They're like, oh, we're good. Our small group, they got us covered. They took care of kids' stuff, helped us with logistics. I'm like, oh, good, all right. How about meals? How you guys doing on meals? Like, oh, our small group's doing all the meals for us. It was almost like, hey, thanks for calling, but why exactly are you calling me? I'm like, oh my gosh, it never gets old for me when I see people carrying one another's burdens, because this is what God designed the church to do. And I'm telling you, when you don't have this in your life, when you don't have a friend that can do that for you, listen, you're going to rob yourself of something God designed for you. When you pray for one another, when you encourage and strengthen one another, and then when you have somebody who says, hey, I'm going to get involved and carry your burdens, and I'm going to kind of make you a part of my inner circle, you know what has a hard time fitting into that equation right there? Loneliness. Loneliness, it doesn't really fit. It begins to go away. It begins to kind of dissolve because there's a confidence that begins to build up. As we wrap up, let me just ask you, where do you need this week? What are you feeling prompted as a next step? Where do you experience a togetherness? Where do you get built up? Where do you get encouraged? Where are you around people that are praying for you? Where are you around people where you can talk about what's going on in your life? Perhaps one of your next steps this weekend is just saying, hey, I'm going to jump into a group. We got men's groups, got women's groups, got groups for anybody. If you don't see groups you like, let us know. We'd love to help you start one. Maybe it's joining a team. The Surgeon General said one of the solutions, it sounds small, but it's just serving, just being a part of something where you're a part of something bigger than yourself. Maybe you've got some of that, but you're like, I just don't have those inner three. I don't have that inner circle that I can go to with anything. Maybe it's saying, okay, how do I take those relationships to a new level? See, God wants this for you. And it's one of the ways we beat this loneliness epidemic. I saw something this week that I kind of chuckled a bit at, but then I was like, I talk about this with my kids, and I wasn't going to show it to you, but I decided to go ahead and put it up anyway, because I think it really helps us understand, okay, God, what's my next step? Here's the phrase right here. You show me your friends, and I'll show you what your future looks like. And that's so true. You show me the people that you're spending time with. I'm not saying eliminate anybody from your life. I'm just saying, who is the inner three? Who are the people that are pushing you toward God, toward love? You show me who those people are. I'll tell you what your life's going to look like. I tell my kids this all the time. See, Jesus, he knew loneliness. He'd been there. He walked that path. He stood there alone. He knew what it was like to have people abandon him. But he also knew that the solution was, how do we create that inner community? How do we build into the people and allow people to build into us and give them permission to step into some of those vulnerable places, so that when we go through things like that we don't have to do it alone. We can be together, because again, together, man, I'm telling you, that's when the magic happens. And I want this for you this week. So I want to pray for us. I want to ask you to stand. We're going to pray. And I just want to ask God to show you maybe what your step is. I mean, I know some of us walked in here, we're dealing with some pretty heavy stuff. And so I just want to pray for us. Heavenly Father, thank you that for every single one of us in this room today, that you are intersecting and meeting us right where we are. For every single person tuning in online, wherever we may be sitting or whatever we may be doing, that you are meeting us in this place. I thank you that you are a God who does this. Father, I just pray that you'd speak to us right now. I pray that you would guide us in this area, that you'd help us make some choices. God, I pray that you would help us to see what our next step is and help us to be able to take that step, whether that's getting into a group. I know it can be scary to step into a group of people that we don't know if we're going to be accepted, if we're going to like them or not. God, I just pray that you give us the courage to maybe take that step for the first time this week, to take a step into serving, being a part of a team. God, sometimes we're like, God, I don't know that I have anything to bring. God, if that's what we need to do to be a part of something, to have some sense of togetherness, God, I just pray that you help us to take that step right now. Father, there's some of us that we're surrounded with people, but we just need some relationships to go to a new level, a new place, a deeper place. I just pray that you help us to know who to bring into that circle. And Jesus, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for your grace. I want to thank you for your goodness that you bring into our lives. I want to thank you for the way that you did for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. So you went to the cross, you went to that place of loneliness so that we wouldn't have to go there. And Father, there's probably some of us even right now who are here knowing that perhaps our first step is just taking a step closer to you. And that's the first step we need to take. And so if that's where you are today, man, just know that you can say yes right now. You can say, Jesus, I want to know you. I want to know your goodness in my life. You can take advantage of the grace that Jesus paved for you when he went to that place on your behalf. And know that the moment you say, Jesus, I want that. I want to know you as my leader. Know that that relationship will start and it will never have to stop. So, Father, for any of us receiving you, I just pray that you'd receive us. And Father, for any of us that are just feeling the weight of loneliness right now, I pray that you would just lift that weight. I just hope that we can hear you say in our minds that you're with us. Show us, God, that you've got us. Show us that you do have a plan, and even when we don't see it happening, that you are a God who is always working, and nothing is impossible with you. And so we just want to rest in that. We want to celebrate that that's what you bring to our lives, Jesus. And we pray these things according to your reputation.
Peace, bring it all to peace. The storm surrounding me, let it break at your name. Still, call the sea to still, the rage in me to still every wave at your name. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, breathe, call these
we hope you've been encouraged today, and our prayer today is that you know that God sees you. He's got you. You may not always see him working, but remember, nothing is impossible with God. Now, if you made the choice today to take advantage of the grace that Jesus brings to us by taking that step to trust Jesus as your Savior and leader, we would love to celebrate that with you. So let us know on your connection card. And if you'd like someone to pray with you today, simply text the keyword "need prayer" to 317-834-7373. And our prayer team will be in touch with you. Now, this is exciting. We thought we might want to give you an update on the Renew Initiative, as you've been up to some pretty amazing stuff. Now, check this out. We just crossed the goal line with over 752,000 committed to Renew. That's above and beyond our normal giving to continue fueling life change around and through this place. So way to go, Crosspoint. If you're a giver, I just want to say thank you. You make all of this possible through your generosity through the Joy Box. And if you want to become a giver, you can go to the Give button at the top of the screen or crosspointweb.org/give, and you know what to do. You are empowering this message and goodness that comes out of this place, and you're investing in making heaven more crowded. On behalf of all of us, thank you so much. All right, thanks so much for joining us today. We can't wait to see you next time for part 3 of Is This Allowed?